All right, hi everyone. Welcome, Believe in Bills. Adam Benigni of WGRZ TV, Sal Maiorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. Believe in Bills presented by FanDuel. Sal, good morning. You weathered the storm that was the NFL draft. How you holding up, man?
It's a long, people don't realize it is a long grind because we're in that media room, Thursday night, late into the early morning. I left at 1:00 in the morning. You go back Friday for a long day or a long night, and then Saturday's a grind, man. Saturday, I got there at 10:30. I left at 8:30.
Yeah.
They made, and he made it more difficult because he made extra picks, all the trades. And then of course, the one that pissed us all off, the audible groan in the media room when he made that pick in the 7th round that cost us. We were supposed to be done at 220, and now we had to wait till 241. Yeah, I gave him some shit when he came in the room. He laughed, but I gave him a little shit when he came in for doing that, because that was an extra hour and a half of work we had to sit around. But look, it is a long grind, but it's a fun weekend, Adam, because they're bringing in players who, you've done a lot of, I shouldn't say all of them, but we've done a lot of work getting ready, and you become familiar with the players, not only that they picked, but the guys that they could have picked. And it's interesting how the process plays out. And really those first 2 days were, really interesting, because so many of the guys you and I have talked about here were sitting there when they were ready to finally make a pick in the 2nd round. And they took a guy that I did write about early in the process. So that was good. I figured he was a possibility. The 3rd round pick we'll see. That was pretty interesting, but we can get into it here. Let's fire away whatever you want to know.
Let's go. I mean, speaking of giving Brandon Beane shit, okay? Before we get into I don't know if we're going to go pick by pick here or whatever the best way to do this is, because so many people have done that, but I think things that stand out is probably the best way to go.
Yeah.
And let's start with the reaction. I mean, you have, and this is true of a lot of drafts, but especially so the dynamic with Beane, post McDermott, Beane elevated with a promotion, trades out of the 1st round. That's always going to get a lot of reaction from the fan base, and a fair degree of negative, right? Which has certainly been the case. I mean, you and I had talked about it from the get-go. I mean, given the nature of the draft this year, I thought he was more successful in doing it. The fact he was able to do it, I wasn't sure he was going to be able to do it once. Given
3 times,
but to do it 3 times and to come up with who they did. But I guess, I mean, the rage among the fan base, or the vitriol that Beane is faced with. I mean, I know you wrote about this. I mean, I get it in one sense, in kind of a high-level sense, but when you really look at it, I don't think it's warranted in this case. I thought it was brilliant what he did on Thursday night, getting out of the 1st round as he did.
Look, this has been a topic since this whole draft process began, that it was not a draft where in the second half of the 1st round, there was enough top-end talent. Yeah, those first, 10 picks, you're going to find studs. There's no doubt every draft is like that. But in past drafts, there's been more depth as you get into the teens and then even into the early 20s. But at number 26, and again, who knows, Adam? I mean, whoever they had picked at 26 might end up being a superstar. We don't know, but there wasn't really a need for him to make a pick there when he knew, like most of us knew, if he trades out of that spot, he was going to get the same player. Now, he ended up at number 35, which is only the 3rd pick of the 2nd round. So he definitely, he lessened the odds of missing there. But the same guy he picked at 35, TJ Parker, he could have picked at 26. There was no doubt he knew he'd still get Parker at 35. We don't know exactly how their draft board looks, so for all we know, this is the guy he wanted, and he knew he'd still be there. So he made the move. He immediately improves his position in the 3rd round with that pick, which was huge. They went from 91, which is near the end of the round, to 66 or 69. He ultimately got to 66 with a later pick or a later trade. That's a lot of players that he just jumped to get into that spot. And we can talk about what he did there, because it was a little bit, I didn't agree with that particular segment, the pick of the cornerback. But yeah, people go nuts because they sit around all night on Thursday and they don't pick a player. And like, what the hell is he doing? How could he do this? It was a very simple explanation. And I just don't think anybody who has rational thought could argue with what he did there. I don't get it. So I wrote a whole column Saturday after, and I got hammered. You can imagine that I got hammered on Twitter because here I am defending Beane again. I'm carrying his water. That's complete bullshit. I'm making the point that I think he made smart moves early in this draft, and he's getting all this hatred since Sean McDermott was fired because he wasn't fired. And, I don't really understand that. I can't stand how people don't look at before he got here what this franchise was like. And since he's been here, they've won the second most games of any team in the NFL behind the Chiefs. They've made 8 playoff appearances. The only team that's currently on a 7-year postseason run. All people want to argue, Adam, is that we don't care about that. He hasn't won a Super Bowl. And that thinking to me is just absurd. It's absurd that this is what people are still pissed about. The Super Bowl is hard to win. He turned the franchise around along with Sean McDermott and obviously Josh Allen. Get off the guy's back and let him get to work. And man, people didn't want to hear that. No. Adam, these social media wackos, and really that's all there is on social media, is just complete cesspool wackos who finally have a voice in their life. They just didn't want to hear me defending Beane and saying, hey, he's actually done a pretty good job when you consider what the shit was that he walked into in 2017.
All right, so let's go down and talk about so he gets to the top of the second round or near it, right? And obviously baked into all this is the fact that he had traded for DJ Moore. And there went the second round pick. So the way he kind of repositioned himself after it, I mean, it made total sense to me. So I echo your sentiments in that regard. But TJ Parker, you mentioned he's a guy that at 35, there they go with the edge rusher, which we thought was an area they might address at the top of this draft, wherever it wound up being. And there's a guy that kind of fits a certain description, a familiar description, maybe more about power and less about speed, right?
Yeah. And that was when they made the pick initially, I was a little bit, I didn't like it first and foremost, Adam, because I really thought the better move there was either Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker, who I had the man crush on him the whole time. I was really hoping they're going to bring him in. He could have been an every down player for them. Nobody they pick on the defensive line, obviously, is going to be an every down player. And then the other guy was Caden McDonald, the nose tackle, run stuffer. I really thought he'd be a great fit. He passed on both of those guys. McDonald went the pick after, and then Rodriguez, of all things, goes to Miami, which is the last place you wanted, besides New England, that you wanted him to go. So I was a little bit pissed that he didn't make that decision and go with one of those. Parker just felt like a little bit repetitive with what they've already got on the roster. Now, they say that he will be a stand-up guy. He did a little bit of both at Clemson. He had his hand down, and he was a stand-up outside linebacker, but he just felt like they've already got that player, right? It just, I don't know. They couldn't get the fast, speedy guy. They had a chance with Cassius Howell. He's the speed guy that they needed. That's the one attribute they needed. But I think they were scared off by the short arms were a thing. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think with his first pick, he wanted to take the risk. So look, we'll see what Parker turns out to be. He's a good player. I mean, everybody that I saw had him as most everybody of the analysts had him as a first round pick. So we'll see. I mean, not everybody can be wrong, right? Maybe the guy will turn out fine.
I thought Caden McDonald. I was thinking, there it is right there. I mean, as soft as they've been against the run, that would have been a big answer for them.
I agree. I just think it feels like, because he was even on GR this morning on radio. He did a spot with those guys, and it just doesn't seem like they feel they need a true nose tackle. He said it again today that he still thinks if we had to play a game right now, he said, Deion Walker would be our nose. And I don't see that. I don't understand the thinking there, but
there's a lot of there's a lot of very good football people that do not think, who know more than me and you, Sal.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Who don't think he's a true nose.
Now they know their team better than we do, Adam. So who are we to argue, I guess? But I also think, and I made this point a while ago, you look at Denver's defense last year with Jim Leonard, being on that staff, and they only used 3 down linemen 38% of the time. And when you look at the snap counts, there was almost no use of a true nose tackle right over the center. So maybe they just don't think that in the Jim Leonard, the way he's going to line up his defensive line, that there isn't the need for that true nose tackle type. You and I can both say their run defense has been lousy, and that seems like a pretty easy thing to plug in, but maybe they don't see it that well. Clearly they don't see it that way. We'll see. We'll see how this works out, if they're actually better on run defense this year. One thing about Parker is he did play pretty well against the run in college off the edge. So that's good. It's good. It's good skill to have, but I still think he's kind of repetitive in his skill set, and they still don't have that true speed rusher off the edge.
So the next pick I want to talk about Davison Igbinosun,
right?
Cornerback, Ohio State, right? And here's
that one didn't make a whole lot of sense.
But it raises a very interesting aspect of this philosophically, right? That this was the thing, Sal, that stood out most to me from the whole weekend, was the priority they're placing on cornerback, right? And him coming out and saying that, I thought that was our biggest need. And I mean, all you have to do is go back to the Denver game, right? And look at how top end, how Peyton was able to figure that out. At the minute those guys, there was whatever, White had to come out of the game, obviously.
They were down to Dane Jackson and Darnell
Dane Jackson at the end, right? I mean, when you look at the second those guys came in, they were exploited, right?
Yep.
And that's the situation where, when games are on the line, I just found it interesting. Whether you agree with it or not, it's very interesting. There's an obvious angle there, right? Where games are on the line, where plays need to be made that get them over the top. To me, he did a great deal to specifically address those shortcomings with that philosophy, and he did it twice in this draft.
Yeah, but that pick, Adam, I just didn't think that made too much sense. I fully understand that they have to get depth at cornerback, but he had, at that point, because of all the maneuvering, he had the 66th pick, which was early in the 3rd round. He found the need to trade up back into the bottom of the 2nd round, which will be a more costly move on the salary cap because he's a 2nd round pick. Like, who the hell was going to pick Igbinosun for in the top of the 3rd round? I don't know why he had to feel the need to trade up, which, it cost him an asset, which he got all those back. That part of it, I just don't know why he needed to do it. And I don't know why he needed to pick this particular player. Your buddy, John Scott, who is as big an Ohio State fan as there is, watches every snap of every game. He had an audible groan when this pick was made, because he said this kid, now again, he's coming from a fan's perspective there. He said he was not a good player for Ohio State. Now, I would counter, and I don't know nearly as enough about Ohio State as John does. I would counter that the guy was, I think he was at least a 3-year starter and maybe a 4-year starter. So he played a lot of big-time games at Ohio State against big-time competition, which is always good especially for a cornerback to come to the NFL with that experience. And one of the biggest things was penalties. And Beane talked about how he did clean that up in his senior year. But there were other needs. Now, they ended up getting their linebacker later, and we'll talk about it. But even at that point, there was defensive tackles or there was linebackers. Why did you need to make that pick on that player who most analysts had him as a late 3rd, early 4th round grade? That felt like a little bit of a reach, but again, we'll see. All it is now is a guy that comes in. We'll see if it was worth it.
He has some good measurables, but it takes a lot of penalties.
He did. The penalties were a problem. Like I said, Beane felt that he did clean that up. And the kid, when he came in to talk to us, he said that was definitely something he worked on. And, he improved his technique in his senior year, and those penalties did come down. So hopefully that continues.
All right, so let's go to the fourth round here, and that's where they address the tackle guard situation. I don't know how deeply you want to go into any of these. I mean, I think Skyler Bell, the receiver, is a talking point, certainly, right?
Definitely. We could talk about him. Yeah, I like that pick. That was a guy that Saturday morning I had to do, hey, guys I'd like to see picked, and he was on my list. He was a guy that I had looked at early on as that's if they don't address, because I think you and I were both in agreement, they weren't going to pick a receiver in the first round and maybe not even the second round. But I thought maybe in that late third round when they had that original pick, or fourth, that's the place they would do it. And I thought Bell was one of those guys, you figured he was going to be there, which he was. And you look at him, he had a really, really nice senior season at UConn. Now they stunk, and he was basically their best player, so they threw the ball a million times to him, but he produced. So, and he has some speed. He ran 4.4 at the combine, which was, I think it was sixth best among the receivers. So you combine the ball production with the speed, which the Bills need.
They need that, right?
I loved that pick. That was
Great
really
pick.
That was a good pick for the Bills. We'll see if he can come in. I mean, to me, if you figure, and you have to figure it this way, more Shakir and Palmer, because Palmer hopefully will be healthy. They're your top three. Skyler Bell is the guy who's going to be competing with Keon Coleman for snaps. I mean, Keon to me is number 4. And if this kid beats him out at training camp, I don't know. What do you do? What do you do with Coleman? Despite all the love they've showered on him, I mean, you keep him he doesn't play special teams. So unless he suddenly becomes a special teams guy, I think the best battle in camp is going to be Bell and Coleman for number 4.
And now I'm digressing here, but what's your take on the Germaine Burton situation?
Yeah, that was, look, the guy is really talented. I think he was a third-round pick of the Bengals.
It was a third-round pick from the Bengals in 24, right? Many projected him as a first-rounder.
Talent-wise, yeah.
Talent-wise, but I mean, to be able to pick this guy up, right? And but it's the off-the-field stuff that cost him.
This guy was not a good guy. This guy's kind of an asshole if you look at his draft record. So I don't know. I mean, sure, you bring him in on a flyer, you invite him to the rookie mini camp, and if he shows something, you bring him to training camp and see what he can do. But I could see fans being a little bit pissed off that you brought a guy like that into your locker room. I don't know the kid at all. I'm assuming that Beane and his people have done a deep dive on it before they made the decision. Give the guy the benefit of the doubt. I know he's had a couple chances, right? He's had a couple chances and he's blown it. So we'll see. I mean, he's nothing more than a flyer at this point, but
it's a flyer
where there's high risk. I mean, there's high reward with high risk, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's not working out,
it's low risk. Right?
It's low risk. It's a flyer. But I mean, if this kid decides to get his act together, I mean, my point is, there's a first-round talent here that many people felt was a first-round talent. So again, we're off the draft subject specifically, but if we're going to address the receiver situation, then I think that needs to be certainly mentioned and about. When you talk about competition and message sending and everything that Keon Coleman, right, is going to have. I mean, look. He's going to be forced to step up, or he's going to be stepping out, I think. I
mean, this guy seems more like a malcontent. I wouldn't call Keon a malcontent. Keon just has alarm problems. He apparently can't work his Apple Watch because that's what's gotten him. He hasn't done things off the field that, got arrested or done stupid stuff. It's just been dumb things. Whereas this guy has some things on his record that don't look too pretty. So, we'll see. We'll see how that works out.
All right. So also in the fourth round, they address linebacker, fifth round safety, defensive tackle in the fifth round as well. Which of those, who do you want to mention in there that either stood out or maybe you questioned in terms of a pick?
Yeah, Caleb Ilarmzor is. I think that's a good pick. They needed to add an off-ball linebacker. Like I said, I wish they had done it in the second round. But this was another guy that I had when I wrote Saturday morning. I was prophetic, man. He was a guy that was sitting there that I thought, yeah, he'd be a good end. Really good speed, great athlete, tested well, and he played a lot at TCU. So I liked that pick. I felt like, now I asked Beane about this because he really isn't, he's a little bit taller. He's 6'2". I think Dorian and Terrell are both 6'1" or 6 foot even, maybe 6'1", but he only weighed, I think he weighed 6 pounds more than Dorian Williams. And I think you and I had both agreed they needed to get a little bit bigger, we thought, at that inside linebacker spot, play the run. And this guy really isn't that much bigger than what they already have, but I think he's a good ad. I think he's going to push Dorian Williams for that starting role right away. And he's going to be there for the next 4 years because Dorian is eligible to be a free agent after this season. So I like that pick where they got him. I think he did a good job with that kid. And then they added the safety Kilgore.
Yeah.
I think it was the 5th round, right, Adam? I think that was the 5th round pick.
Yeah, he was Kilgore was round 5, pick 167.
Yeah, he was another guy. I didn't have him on my list. I really didn't do much work on safeties. But look, we've talked about how Gardner Johnson and Geno Stone are on 1-year contracts. They need to think about the future at that position. I never thought they were going to pick, any of those guys at the top of the draft. It was nice to think about it, but it wasn't going to happen. This kid, he has some production, and I think they can, and he also had some punt return ability, I think. So that, they're always looking for a punt returner. So I like that pick too, where they got him. I think that was a pretty good idea. So there's 2 guys they can add to this defense that I think they got a chance to make the team for sure.
And then if you look at the 7th round, the cornerback again, like I had mentioned, the second of those in selecting Toriano Pride Jr. And then you got a punter in there.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
You finish out with depth on the offensive line at guard. So just
punter,
your take on the 7th round, and then we'll some final thoughts. We'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I don't care about the 7th round at all, unless you pick a punter, and they did. Right. This was a topic that was going on a lot. Joe Buscaglia loves punters, so he was all on board with this when it happened. But yeah, absolutely, you pick a guy in the 7th round. The only position that guy is going to contribute is if he's the punter or kicker, obviously. So they've got Wisnowski on a 1-year deal. He did well. He came in at week 5, I think it was, and really settled down the punting job. He's back on a $1.2 million contract. If this kid can come in, and he had a nice career, started at Michigan, then went to Florida. He had a really nice career. He can also kick off. He's a long kickoff specialist if they want to give Tyler Bass, a break with doing that specific role. If this kid can make the team, they're going to save, probably $500,000 on the salary cap. People don't think that really means much, but at this point, when you go into the trade deadline area, every little dollar could end up counting. So if the kid can beat out Wisnowski, great. Good 7th round pick. That's the only place where the 7th round matters, is if you're picking kicker, punter, or long snapper.
So that would wrap it up. I mean, I think we see an obvious emphasis on defense here.
Yeah.
Which continues to be a trend for this team.
It had to be on defense. They had to improve this defense. They're really, the offense was really good last year, right, Adam? I mean, what did they really need? We talked about guard, because they've got Corbett's on a 1-year deal. Alec Anderson, they're going to be apparently battling it out for left guard. That's going to be a step down from what they had in David Edwards. So you got to start thinking about it. The kid they picked in the 4th round, Jude Bowery, was a tackle at Boston College, but Beane said he'll start out competing to be swing tackle, but it looks like, some of the analysts have said he might be better suited to slide inside. So maybe he's an option down the road at guard, maybe next year. So that was probably a good pick too. They had to address it, and they did. So yeah, I think all in all, look, it wasn't a big sexy draft for the Bills, Adam. It wasn't. They checked off some boxes at some clear and obvious needs. we'll see how these guys can come in. This is already a pretty good team, right? Rookies coming into this team, they're not going to have a bunch of guys that are going to jump right in and be stars for the Buffalo Bills. The Jets have got some guys that are going to come right in and probably be really good players. But on this roster, there's not a lot of room for players to make an early impact as rookies. So I like most of what he did. The pick of the corner is going to be the one that I'm going to look back and say, is that the guy you needed to add in that particular spot? But I'm not going to shit on the kid. Let him come in, let him compete, and see what happens. For all we know, Jim Leonhard is questioning what Max Hairston can really be. And maybe this was a pick that he pushed for. They'll never tell us, but maybe that's why they went so early with a corner, because they're not sure about Max Hairston. So that's my thought.
And for me, it goes as far back as I'm not saying I necessarily agree with taking him there, but I go back when I arrived in Buffalo, John Butler was the general manager, and among the first things he ever said to me is you can never have enough cornerbacks. And I know that's a philosophy that, exists around the National
Every GM
Football
says
League.
that.
Right. And given the way this past season ended, you can make a case for it. So I'm with you. If that kid comes in, makes a big play in a big game late, or can provide competition and push Hairston or whatever happens, there's an opportunity very early on in this kid's tenure for Beane to be proven right.
And you got to remember, Benford has proven to be a guy who gets hurt, right? Mm-hmm. Every year he misses, a game, 2, 3, whatever. And Hairston clearly had injury problems last year. So yeah, having a guy who could come right in and play and even start if need be, I guess you can make the case that was probably a smart play. I'll, give Beane credit. Maybe he realizes he really needed to do that.
All right, so FanDuel, presenting sponsor for this show and others on the Believe Network. AFC East, odds Bills remain in front and have distanced themselves from the Patriots a little bit. Buffalo minus 135, New England plus 130. The Jets jump into the third spot, plus 2,200, and the Miami Dolphins plus 3,000. Obviously, some off-the-field stuff going on in New England as well. A lot of tension surrounding that particular franchise. But the Bills coming out of this draft, and the grades, Sal, as we wrap it up, I mean, and I'm not much for draft grades. I mean, I think it's just another way to get clicks, and everyone wants to think in those terms, but you're not going to know for at least 2 years, really. I mean, if you're really going to assess a draft class, it's probably 2 years, maybe more, maybe longer. You can see aspects. Certain players can jump out early, obviously, but in terms of when you really want, in terms of an overall draft grade, you got to wait multiple years. I will say this, though. It's interesting, the range on Buffalo. I mean, NFL.com gives them a straight A.
Yeah, I saw that.
Fox Sports, those guys were all, were thrilled with Beane trading out of the first round the way he did, right? And then you've got others. Kuiper Jr. kind of knocked them down a few pegs or whatever. There's just an interesting range, and obviously the fan base that exists as well as we open with. So, it's interesting to talk about, but there's no real conclusions to be drawn, I think, at this point.
Drafting grades, even drafting the pick when they make the pick is so stupid to me. But this is, like you said, it's clickbait heaven these days. And I don't do that stuff. I just don't. It's dumb. It's dumb to even think about it.
That's going to do it. That's our post-draft edition. Believe in Bills. We'll continue with this through the course of the offseason and into the preseason. For Sal Maiorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, I'm Adam Benigni of WGRZ, Sports Talk Live Buffalo, Monday night, 7 o'clock on Channel 2. And we've got Believe in Bills, Believe in Sabres as well. Sabres with a 3-1 series lead now on the Boston Bruins, really kicking things into gear in games 3 and 4. So we have that as well. Bills and Sabres coverage here on Believe. So for Sal, I'm Adam. Thanks for being with us. This has been Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel.